Thanks, Janice. I have to say, attended many sessions on analytics, Industry 4.0, really great talks, enjoyed every one of them. What'll be maybe different and unique about this one, the analytics approach my company's taking, it's a corporate-centric analytics platform. Also, this will be an example from biopharmaceutical industry, kind of batch-based analysis. I and I'll go into a use case where we're starting to get value from the data, and I'll go into some detail on how that the techniques that went into getting that value. I sit in a group that's at the intersection of IIoT, so similar to what some gentlemen said yesterday, I get the slings from both sides, but it also allows me to provide unique perspective on how you orchestrate various elements around the company to put together your analytics platform. Okay. So last year, I was on this podium. Thank you for having me back, Janice. I talked about elements of digital transformation, and at the heart of it was the analytics, which we branded our manufacturing analytics product data management, and we did that for a specific reason. We wanted to invest a lot of resources into our top-selling products by revenue. So these are our top 3 selling products. Each individually generates $5 to $10 billion in revenue, and work really hard to get the data in a form ready for our end users. We call it analysis ready. And so that'll be a primary focus of the talk. Continue on in programs in predictive condition monitoring and our technology-enabled labs, creating execution systems in the laboratories. I just do want to make a call out to open standards. Still very much a part of our digital strategy, but it's an enabler for the analytics platform. And there was a gentleman asked a great question yesterday, Gary Marsh from Intel. I don't know if he said, he asked the questions, to what extent do open standards help enable analytics? And for us, it's central because so many of our source systems, control systems, they were never set up to stream into your analytics platform. And still you have to do all these crazy gyrations and backup tapes and those kinds of things. Very much not aligned to the goal of automated real-time streaming. So, and across the way is the Open Process Automation Forum, and so we see that very much as an enabler for our digital platform. So if those of you have interest, stop by the booth. I think it's a really good thing. Okay, so product data management, the purpose is to establish reliable manufacturing supply for our key products. The inputs into the analytics platform will be sourced from our manufacturing plants, our laboratories, external partners, as well as our process development labs, all feeding the analytics platform. Raw material data from suppliers, certificates of analysis, we want to collect as much as we can. A lot of talks this week have talked about what happens when you get it into your corporate data lake. It's very important, as we found as we started porting this data into the platform, to make sure your data taxonomy is correct, that you're calling things consistently. Sometimes we look across multiple systems, the same thing, a part number, material number, 3 different part numbers from 3 different systems because each system kind of grew up in its own siloed area. So getting the naming is a tricky business. Governance is so important. So I imagine everyone in this room has contributed files to like a department share drive, right? And if it's not managed correctly, that share drive goes wild very quickly. Now imagine on a grand scale where you're putting data from all these various sources and you have to make sure there's some kind of governance and standards. Otherwise, your data lake can grow wild very quickly. And then finally, the outputs from the platform, all the things that we've seen this week, the dashboarding, advanced analytics, and the self-service export, with the idea that we want to do a lot of the work in the data platform ahead of, so to minimize the burden on our end users so we call it analysis-ready data at the end state. Okay. So I'll very quickly go through current state, future state, but similar to the gentleman before me, it's still an amazing amount of Excel out there in the corporation. Certificates of analysis and laboratory data that's not in the laboratory information management system. Still a lot of manual transcription as we try to port this data to the analytics platform. Again, the sources being manufacturing, plants, development labs, and external partners. So going to future state, um, real-time data streaming and ingestion, migrating those source systems, a very concerted effort of modernization. So we've talked in some of the other forums is, how do you get out of this obsolete state? Often as you replace and upgrade systems, it's not a good ROI proposition, right? You don't get increased functionality. But one thing driving the new justifications around obsolescence and modernization is, hey, we're going to have streaming capability to feed the analytics platform, free the data, make it an automatic real-time ingestion. And so that's gained traction for a lot of our obsolescence projects. And it's been a driver to look at our source systems and see, can we add new functionality and improve the ROI proposition for those projects? Okay. So high-level overview of the analytics platform. We take our source systems and ERP, MES, LIMS, control systems, historians, continuous batch, all feeding a corporate data lake. And then I'm going to introduce two new topics, that of the data warehouse and the data mart. Data warehouse is where you've cleansed it. You're starting to make the data more useful. You take out the irrelevant stuff. You start joining the data to, in our case, the products around which we want to build the data platform. And then further, you can build out what we call data marts, and they're even more product specific. So Keytruda is listed there as our top selling product. We're going to do a data mart specifically around data around that product. And similarly for quality systems and supply chain, they have their own specialized data mart. The consumers are on the far side of the graph, and again, the dashboarding, the analytics, the self-service data. In general, we don't want data engineers giving data to process engineers. It should be a self-service model. And, okay, moving on. Okay, so I'll specifically focus on data marts for manufacturing data. Central to this is a batch ID given by your ERP system. And then we marry all the relevant data around that batch ID from your laboratory information management system, the batch historian. There may be sub-batches that make up the primary batch ID. That gets fed in there. And again, cleansed so that only where the factory is operating, that unit is operating, that relevant data is actually put into the data mart. The continuous historian, all the data from your valves, pumps, motor, instruments, all that goes in there, as well as raw materials. And the future vision is there would be calibration data, maintenance work order data, and you can build out from there. But all data goes to the data lake as a principle, and from there, our data engineers work on. I'll go back to this previous slide, working on transforming that data into usable data in the data marts. I just also want to mention something that's come up consistently in these talks. It's still 80% of the work is on the left side. So we like to think we can get to the analytics and use all the powerful algorithms and the dashboarding, but there is so much work in the ingestion of the data, in the data wrangling and the data cleansing to get to the end state. And I just want to leave a key point is don't underestimate the amount of work to get it to a usable form. Okay, now we're getting the good stuff. So we've done all that work to get the data into the data mart, to associate with that batch ID, all the relevant data. We're then going to go back in history and load 5 years worth of history for one particular product. And so we've got 150 or so batches in the data mart. And how we put it to use is we're looking to generate insights from all this data that we had not been able to see before because the data had been scattered in individual siloed systems. And by putting it all together, we can harness the power of cheap storage, compute, and algorithms to try to generate insights into what makes a better performing process. We're going to look across all those batches, categorize them into high performing batches and lower or ordinary performing batches, and what insights in the data will tell you or clues into high performing versus lower performing batches. So I promise only one slide on statistics 101. The concept of p-value, a measure of statistical significance. When you do a hypothesis test and you're looking for really low p-value, 0, which indicates strong indication of statistical significance. High p-values means random occurrence. And then we do and apply chi-square hypothesis testing. And what we're trying to do here is again, separate the high performing batches into one category, the low performing batches in a second category, and look at key elements in that whole data mart. What is it, what's causing, or what are the characteristics typical of lower performing batches that don't appear in the strong performing ones? And in talking with our process engineers, they wanted to look at alarms and they wanted to look at valves. And so we narrowed down the focus to setting up this statistical testing and hypothesis testing around alarms related to high-performing batches and valves. And we found some really interesting stuff. So in this one factory, the data set 1 is the ordinary performing batches, and the data set 2 is what we call the high-performance batches. We found one particular alarm, this buffer hold time limit alarm, appeared in 19 out of 21 of the ordinary batches, but only appeared 50% roughly in the second batches. But that is statistically significant if you measure by p-value. That is not a random event. And similarly, buffer hold tank limit switch appeared 5 times in the lower performing batches, only 3 out of 1 of 5. So again, a statistically significant event which astounded some of our process engineers. In the past, they would not have been able to come to these types of conclusions. And while it may not get down to root cause, we're looking for correlative behavior to narrow the search for process issues in the plant, rather than looking at that whole haystack. Look for the needle in just this particular part, and we narrow it down to the buffer process. Buffer is this controlled pH salt water that's used in the chromatography, which is central to the process. And that's why we think, and where we've pointed engineers to do a deeper dive to drive to root cause. And then we did a similar analysis around valve sequences, and these are open and closed valves in the factory. There's maybe 500 open and closed valves, but we narrowed down to a set of 70 around some key unit operations. And we developed a state vector based on an instant of time the valves are open and closed in a certain sequence. Search across all the valve states. And so you can imagine a very long column of state vectors that every 5 to 10 seconds you have these valves opening and closing and changing the vector. And apply that and that same hypothesis testing to discover, are there certain valve sequence states that are found in the ordinary batches, but not in the high-performing batches? And if yes, focus your analysis on that. And so what the analysis uncovered, in the ultrafiltration area of the process, we found valve sets that in the lower performing batches appeared 10 out of 11 times, but never appeared in the high-performing batches. And similarly, in 2 parts of ultrafiltration, we saw that in chromatography, we found some valve sets that, again, appeared in the lower performing batches, but never appeared in high performing batches, which led our process engineers now to dive deep. Look at what the valves are doing. Are you opening some valve open at a time you're not expecting it to? Are there other parts of the factory that are being supposedly blocked off by that valve, but are actually opening? So you're exposing it to some other part of the factory that may be causing something to make the batches go bad. Okay. And so based on these initial wins through the analysis, we got really good feedback from our technical operations crew. So, and one person who is in charge of the technical operations in that particular factory said, they're getting visibility and transparency of the process that would have taken years to crawl through all those different systems data that they wouldn't have now that it's all been aggregated in one place. The other key point was it took a team of people with vastly different skill sets to put this together. So you need data engineers, you need statisticians, you need process automation folks, you need process engineering. Everyone brings a unique skill set to the analysis. But in working together and each person focusing on their piece of it, we were able to put together this type of analysis. Okay. So lessons learned from all this, it really all first started top down when the CEO of the company says, we're going to go into this digital transformation and we're going to invest money. And he authorized the CIO to spend significantly on a cloud infrastructure so we can do this. I talked about the data stewardship and not letting your lake start to look like your departmental shared drives that grow wild and messy. So you need governance around that. I'll jump down to cross-functional collaboration. So you saw all those various skill sets. No one person has all those skill sets. So it takes a team of people across different geographies, different locations to come together to put together this analysis. And finally, if you start delivering the results, your business partners, those people on the floor, they start seeing these results. They start seeing insights they would never have gotten via the old means. When they become big believers, it's this positive feedback loop where they say, invest more in this, and then we can throw more resources. First, we're going to tackle our top 3 revenue producing products, but based on the momentum from the initial analysis, we think we can eventually get all our products into the data platform. Thank you.